time. Jack was your typical normal boy, but one day when Jack went to school, he saw a kid bullying another kid, and that's when, well, everything just changed from there on. Bob didn't know what to do, except he knew how to do everything. But Bob didn't want anything in particular. He just wanted something to do with his ordinary kid life. But that's when he kept on seeing the same thing happening and happening every single day. But then Bob wanted to do something more or less than just having anger in him. So what he did was he grabbed his fist was cluttered. He was ready. He wanted to punch that kid so hard in his face that it would bleed, but he knew he couldn't. So what he did was that he, instead of saying, "Kid, give me all your money," he wanted more. From that kid that bullied the other kid. So what he did was that he grabbed his bully boy. He punched that kid that was bullying the other kid. He punched him in the nose and said, "Leave him alone. It's not his fault. It's yours." The principal saw and called out for him. But when he went to the office, he said, "That kid that I punched, he started it first. Why am I even in here? Trying to send me to child therapy." And so that's what the principal did. He didn't speak. He just let Jack speak for himself. And then Jack wanted more. He wanted more of it. He wanted more revenge than ever. But of course, he had to speak to the child therapist. Yeah. And then one day, Jack realized something. If he wanted to be a good boy, then he had to be the fellow, the ladio, the pantry of the fellow he once was. So what he did was went to my bully boy's school in town. He said, "I'm a good kid." But that was all in Jack's imagination. In reality, he was with the child therapist. So The therapist said, Jack, you're ununique than the other children. Why is that? The child Jack did not speak, but he did speak in dots. You said nothing. He said, I'm a good boy. You just don't know that. And so, that's what went on in the school for months now. But, at last, it couldn't last. It couldn't last another day of it. So, years later, Jack is now a successful CEO in a business, but when he goes off, he's not your typical one. He's more or less he's more or less a murderer now. But he says to everyone, trust me, I only punched a kid in high school because he was bullying another big brain kid. And that's not right, is it, boys? Everyone agreed with him, and so that's what they did. They agreed, spoke, that's it. But that's not all. When he asked what's wrong, he responded with something very sinister. Jack was very meek and didn't like talking that much, especially his son. He was a bit meek as well, a bit not smart, a bit smart. And Jack one day looked in his vault and saw half the money split into half. He asked his son, Son, did you do the math equation and split it into half? His son replied, No, Dada, I didn't. But when Jack looked into his son's room, he saw the half money there, and he was in shock. He said, Son, I looked in your room. You halved my money to yourself, but why? The son replied, Mommy told me. Jack was pale as a ghost. His son's mother died when she gave life to Jack's son. She died from blood loss. He thought his son was seeing paranormal things, but when Jack realized that his son was more unique than the others, he realized that he needed to move out of the house if he wanted to live. So that's what Jack did. He said, Son, pack up, we're going to see Grandma. And that's what they did. They moved out, but the mother didn't die from blood loss. You may be asking how did she die? Well, Jack actually murdered her when his son was born. And he still does it till this day. And now that Jack and his son are split into two halves, just like the money, Jack has potentials in everything, but in principle, it's just not gonna work for them. So, 20 years later, when the son is not 3 years old anymore, he's about around Jack's age, and he punched the kid. 18 right now. He saw something more sinister to his son. One day when Jack was walking, he saw his son assassinate someone, and he smiled with a fatherly smile. Not a sinister one, but Jack has never smiled in his life. He walked away from his son, just laughing sinisterly and smiling along the way. But when Jack sees more potential in his son, he sees more than assassination in him. So that's what he did. Exactly by accident. His son, his own son, accidentally pulled the trigger, and bang, Jack was gone. Just like that. The son stood pale, pulling up his coat, zipping it up, wanting to jump over and never be seen again.